Hello, myRockworld. This is Martin. I'm very excited to have a call and interview right now with Brian Downey, well known as a founding member of the legendary band Thin Lizzy. Welcome to myRockworld, Brian.
Yes, thank you very much, Martin. Thank you for having me on.
Brian, first of all, when I heard the news some weeks ago that you are going back on tour and join forces with some really great musicians, I was totally blown away. Please tell us something about your new project called Brian Downey's Alive and Dangerous and how it come together, and also please introduce all of the band members.
Yeah, okay. Well, what happened was we met back in 2015. Me and Brian Grace met at a pub, and we were discussing our musical direction because we had the idea of getting a band together. And when we discussed our musical direction, Brian Grace mentioned to me that why don't we do something connected with Thin Lizzy? And I said, well, what do you have in mind? He said, we can go out and play maybe some Thin Lizzy tunes, and we can maybe start a new band and call it something connected with Thin Lizzy. And I said, well, yeah, we had a discussion later with a couple of friends of ours about it, and one of our friends mentioned, why don't we call the band Alive and Dangerous rather than just Live and Dangerous, which is the album. And I thought it was a nice little inflection on the Alive and Dangerous album. And we decided to call it Alive and Dangerous. And then we decided to call it Brian Downey's Alive and Dangerous, so everybody would know who we were. So that's how that started. So we got together. We did a Vibe for Philo back in 2016, and Matt Wilson and Phil Edgar was there, our guitar player and bass player and singer. And Brian introduced me to them. They invited me up to play some numbers on the stage, and that's what I did. And I was really, really impressed with the whole situation because Matt and Phil and Brian knew the songs maybe better than I did.
Yeah,
which was fantastic to know. It was really great to know.
Awesome.
And so after that, we discussed it, and we decided to bring in Brian and Matt into the band. Went straight into rehearsals, and we got in contact with a few people here in Europe. One of them was Dirk Summer. Dirk decided, he wants to get on board to do some shows, and we decided to do an Irish tour a few months ago, and that's what we did. And we finished the tour about 2 weeks ago, and now I'm talking to you from Sweden. We have some dates in Sweden.
Okay.
And we're right in Sweden at the minute as I'm speaking. Yeah. So that's basically how the whole thing started, and now we're going to go to France and Germany, and lots of dates in Germany. Really looking forward to playing there. We all are, and that will be happening in October. So we're all really looking forward to playing in Germany.
That's awesome. Brian, question. I have had a listen to some clips out on YouTube, and I feel that with your new band, you are much more back to the original Thin Lizzy sound, comparing with the sound when you played with Scott Gorham under the name Thin Lizzy a few years ago. Would you agree on this fact? And also, what was the reason? Was this maybe also the reason you have left that lineup back in 2011? I think it was.
Yeah. No, that wasn't a reason at all. In fact, what actually happened was when we were doing the Thin Lizzy reunion shows. We came to a decision that they wanted to do an album under the Thin Lizzy name. Now that was refused by Phil Lynot's heirs, and I suggested we just keep playing as the Thin Lizzy band, forget about recording anything, and keep playing on the road. And Scott and the rest of the guys really didn't agree. They wanted to do an album. So they had to change from Thin Lizzy to Black Star Riders to do the album. I really wasn't too interested in playing in a brand new band and going out on the road and all that.
Okay.
With a new album and all that. So I just decided to step aside, and they got a new drummer in. So it was nothing to do with the sound or the anything like that. It was just a purely commercial decision.
Yeah.
I didn't particularly want to go on the road with a brand new band. And that's why I decided to step aside.
Okay.
And You know, I know this band sounds very authentic to the early Thin Lizzy sound, and that's a kind of a conscious decision, and yet it wasn't my decision. It's just the way the guys play. You know the songs from back, obviously when you first heard them years and years ago. They're youngish guys, they're in their 20s, so they put their own kind of inflections on the songs, and that's why it sounds very authentic, like the old band.
Yep.
Because they were listening to the old sounds on the records. That's the sound they tried to recreate. And that's what we tried to do, recreate the old Thin Lizzy sound from back in the 70s and early 80s.
And this is really awesome. I've heard it, and it blew me away.
Yes, thank you.
What can we expect from the upcoming shows and also from the set list?
Well, the set list is basically based around the Live and Dangerous album, with a couple of additions, like Bad Reputation and a few other songs. So we tried to change it around every maybe couple of nights, just to put an extra one or two songs in that we hadn't played in a while. So that keeps everybody happy. You know, everybody's on their toes, new songs in there. We don't have the same set every second night. Maybe we want to change. So that's the way we approach it. It's not the same set every single night. Could be different on subsequent nights. So that's the way we try to do it, and it's going down really well. You know, we can't do all the songs that people request on the shows, but we try our best. We keep them in mind, and maybe after a few shows we try to include some of those requests.
Yeah.
And that's the approach we have. Yeah.
Awesome. Are there also plans to record some shows, maybe for a live record?
There was talk about doing some shows, maybe not recording some shows, but maybe going into the studio and trying out some new material. But we could record live shows if that opportunity came up. If you got decent sound, and obviously you'd need a proper engineer, recording engineer, maybe a little producer, and we could do something. But it hasn't really been discussed yet. We're only out in Europe for a week and a half, maybe, but we will discuss that. That's a good idea. I'll keep that in mind. In fact, and you never know what might happen with this band. We could easily do a live recording of the shows. But there again, we'd like to go in maybe in a couple of years' time and do some studio work as well. Maybe record some of our own songs, hopefully.
Awesome, great.
I'll keep that in mind. What you just said there. That's a good idea.
Great. Brian, the next question might be a little hard for you. What is your favorite Thin Lizzy album and why? And which Thin Lizzy album would you recommend a young fan who is just about to explore the band?
Yeah, it's kind of a hard question because I kind of played on them all, but I still have a soft spot for the early Decca Records, which is the first, second, and third album we ever did. I kind of like those albums. But to pick a favorite, I suppose, the later material, maybe Bad Reputation. That album is a very good album. I like most of the songs in that. I like most of the songs in Black Rose. Johnny the Fox. But to pin it down to one album, it's really hard. I suppose my favorite album would be from the early period, the early Thin Lizzy period would be the first album, Thin Lizzy. And from the later period, I'd pick Bad Reputation. And for younger musicians coming up, I suppose listening to Bad Reputation and Black Rose would be a good way to start getting into Thin Lizzy, I suppose. They're great albums to listen to, good songs, fantastic musicianship there, and maybe that would be the two albums. I can't pick one album because I prefer both. One from the early period with Eric Bell, and some from the later period with Scott Gorham and Brian Robertson. So they'd be my favourites.
I would always take Jailbreak, but that's okay.
Jailbreak is a great album, but it's too obvious to pick for me because it was our most popular and successful album. But I agree with you, it's a fantastic album as well. That's what I'm saying, it's really nearly impossible to pick your favourite Thin Lizzy album. To me, they're all pretty good,
They're all fantastic, sure.
But I would pick Bad Reputation and the first Thin Lizzy album as my favourites,
Okay.
Yeah.
Fine. Let's go a little bit back into the Thin Lizzy history. Do you remember the first day you have met Phil Lynott and when it was? And please tell us what kind of man he was, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the first time I met Phil was actually in school when I was a big fan of the band he was in, which was called the Black Eagles, and when I went to see those, in the local theatre in Dublin, I realised how good Phil was, and I knew he went to my school as well, but he wasn't in my class, so I used to see him in the schoolyard, and so I plucked up the courage one day to go over and say how good the band was, how good the Black Eagles was, the band he was playing with. And he turned around and thanked me, and he said, "Thank you very much." He says, "But our drummer is leaving very shortly. If you're interested, why don't you come down and do an audition for the band?" And I was flabbergasted when he said that. I was amazed that he asked me to come down to do the audition. And he said in the next breath, he said, "But we're going to put an advert on the paper for drummers, so you better answer the ad." So I answered the ad, and I said to him a few days later, he said, I answered the ad. He says, "Well, I'll remember your face when you get to the audition." So I got down to the audition, and he remembered me. He remembered who I was, and he remembered me and put in a good word, I think, when I was in the audition. But I kind of played. I played a song called "You Really Got Me" by the Kinks, which was a pretty popular tune at the time, and I remember how to play it. When he asked me to play it, I knew it back to front because I had the album at home. I had a Kinks album. That song was on it, and it was a big hit in the charts as well. So I had no problem with that. But Phil came across as a really nice person. He had a fantastic personality. I was enthralled with him, in fact, because I was a big fan, in fact, of the Black Eagles, the band he was singing with. And when I said that to him, he was great. He says, "Oh yeah, I remember your face in the audience. I remember you and your friend used to come down." I said, "Yeah, we went to quite a few gigs with the Black Eagles, and we really liked the band." But then when I actually joined the band, I realised how fantastic Phil was as a person and as a musician. Now at that stage, he wasn't playing bass guitar; he was just singing. But he used to play a little bit of acoustic guitar, and he was thinking of writing songs. I got to know him after about 4 or 5 months within the band.
Okay.
He was telling me he wanted to write some songs, but it took him a few years actually to get around to writing songs, because when I left the Black Eagles and he left, he went straight into Skid Row, which was a fairly popular band in Ireland back then, and I joined a band called the Sugar Shack, and we kind of went our separate ways for a year, maybe a year and a half. And then we met up again, and he told me he had left Skid Row, and why don't we form another band? And I said, "Yeah, that's a great idea."
So who came up with the band name Thin Lizzy?
Well, we were in a rehearsal situation in a club in the centre of Dublin City, and we were sitting around trying to find a name for the band. And Eric Bell, who was our guitar player, he said, "Well, why don't we call it Thin Lizzy, which is TINLIZZIE?" Yeah. And I said, "Well, isn't that a character in one of the comic books, the Beano comic?" And he said, "Yeah, it's a female robot in the comic book, which was the Beano, I think." And he said, "Yeah, that's exactly right." I went, "Well, that's a pretty good name, but I don't think we can use it because of the fact that it's been used already." And he said, "Well, we can always change the spelling." And I said, "What do you have in mind?" And Phil Lynott said, "Well, maybe try a Y at the end of Thin Lizzy." And I said, "Well, that's a great idea." And then Eric said, why don't we change it from tin to thin, which is DHIN. So we put the H in and we put the Y at the end of Lizzy, and that's exactly how Thin Lizzy's name came about. It was a mixture of Eric Bell and Phil Lynott thinking of awesome. Changing the spelling a little bit. I'd no input there at all. So it's just those two guys that added the name. Yeah.
So are you still in contact with Eric Bell?
I still see Eric every so often. Not too much lately, but I see him maybe once a year. Yeah, I try to keep in contact with him. But being on the road and him being on the road as well, it's not easy to keep in contact because we're in different countries and most of the year nowadays. So, but I do run into him in the Vibe for Philo and every January. Sometimes he turns up, sometimes I do. So I meet him there. Sometimes he calls me up on the phone. I have a conversation on the phone. But I try to keep in contact with all the guys, all the ex-members. But it's not easy because as years go by, you kind of lose contact with the ex-members as well. So it's not that easy, really.
Sure. Brian, what was your personal high point with Thin Lizzy? Do you have one to point out?
Yeah, I suppose my personal high point would have been playing on Top of the Pops with Whiskey in the Jar. When Whiskey in the Jar got into the charts, the band is getting quite loud. On Top of the Pops, with Whiskey in the Jar was certainly a big highlight for me because Top of the Pops was a major rock show in the UK. And when I was living in Ireland with Phil Lynott and Eric Bell, we used to try to look at Top of the Pops coming from England. We were living in Ireland, so we couldn't really get fantastic reception. It was pretty snowy, but we could see most of it and hear the music. So that was a big ambition of ours before we got on Top of the Pops, was to appear on the actual show. And when Whiskey in the Jar came out and got into the charts, that's exactly what happened. We actually appeared on Top of the Pops playing Whiskey in the Jar, and it was a fantastic experience, a great feeling knowing that we've come all the way from Ireland into England, and we were successful in England in the English top 20 charts, and that was a fantastic achievement, as far as I can say. And that was at that time that was definitely my favourite achievement. Mm-hmm. Maybe still is. Yeah.
That's great. Can you share any funny or secret Thin Lizzy story maybe with us? It could be a funny turbo secret maybe, or anything else.
Too many secrets. That's the problem. They're all secrets.
Maybe a secret that nobody knows about Thin Lizzy.
I spilled the beans now. People wouldn't think too much of me, especially the members of the band. Maybe we'll keep that secret.
We keep it secret.
Keep it secret. I can't divulge all the secrets we used to get up to back in the day, so I won't say anything.
So there are too many secrets, and you can write a book someday.
Secrets, absolutely. I might do that.
Awesome.
Secrets might come out in the book.
Okay. One more general question: who are your heroes starting out playing music?
Oh, my heroes. Oh, well, I suppose looking back. Most of the early American rock groups were around back in the 70s and early 60s, maybe in the 60s and 70s, which was a great era for me because, I mean, that's when rock music really became, mature and grew up since the 50s. And I suppose, really back in the day, I just mentioned the Kinks and the Rolling Stones and the Beatles and all the major bands that came up in the 60s. They were a massive influence on most of my generation, I suppose, including me. And later, Jimi Hendrix, Cream would have been massive influences. All the British blues bands would have been a big influence, like John Mayall's Breakers, Sabri Brown, early Fleetwood Mac with Peter Green. I suppose the Keith Hartley band, they were a big influence. So all the British and American, the invasion bands, I suppose, British invasion bands that went to America, and a lot of the American bands like Jimi Hendrix, The Doors. I've got too many influences actually to mention. They were all very influential on it. But I suppose really to pin it down, it would have been Jimi Hendrix and the Cream, and that generation of bands that appeared on Woodstock, I suppose, were Santana, Richie Havens, people like that were big influences as well. Yeah, definitely, yeah. That generation of musicians were just, to me, they were fantastic. And in fact, some of those albums from the late 60s, early 70s still sound kind of fresh to my ears anyway today, which is fantastic. 40 years later, they still sound quite fresh to me, most of the albums I got back then. And I put them on even nowadays, and they sound really fresh as well. So that's a good sign.
Yeah.
Good sign of good songs. Yeah, great sign.
Do you still listen to new music?
I try to listen to new music. Yeah, there's so much around nowadays. It's kind of hard to listen to all the new releases that's come out over the years, especially with the new formats.
Yeah.
But I try to keep my ear to the ground as much as possible. I don't have any favourite bands, but
Yeah.
I appreciate most of the bands that's around nowadays. It's a real struggle for bands I find nowadays because the venues aren't around, especially in the UK and Ireland. The venues aren't like what they were years ago. There's not many venues left for young bands or new bands to play, which is unfortunate. But I know in Germany there's a good scene for bands, for musicians. Most countries in Europe have it all right, but it's not the same as it was back in the 70s, maybe 80s. But it's still vibrant enough. I mean, I really do think that some of the bands, the up and coming bands, have it harder than we had it back in the 70s, maybe. I think that, yeah. And I wish all those new bands well, because it is a struggle nowadays to make it. So I really wish them all the best of luck. I really do.
Okay. So, coming to the last question, it's not a question. Brian, please some words to your fans.
Oh yeah. Well, I'd like to wish all the fans who are coming to our shows in Germany, I just hope they really like the band, and we're going to put on the best performance possible. And I'm sure they'll all appreciate that, and I'm really looking forward to playing there. I'm looking forward to seeing all the fans, all new faces, and all our old fans as well. So all the members of the band are really looking forward to it.
Okay, awesome. Thank you very much for the interview, Brian. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Martin. I'll see you in Germany when we get there.